a chapter of Expect the Unexpected by Arctic Vulpix with help from Corona Pack. We are on chapter 77, and if you want to follow along, which really do highly recommend, link will be in the description below as always. Uh, Again, do recommend that way you can leave a review. Don't have an account, that's fine. It just needs to be on the side. So yeah. And also easier to follow along because I have a habit of accidentally skipping over words or struggling with them. So really do recommend. So let's get right into it, shall we? This is chapter 77. Return. Katie would have preferred not to surprise her like she did, pushing out into the hallway despite the pain and Jeremy trying to hold her back. But Maggle's suit was plastic, not thick foam like Foxy's. It really would crack badly. Mad was up such a fright that she tripped and fell on the floor. That was preferable to slamming into the door that the building clearly wasn't beyond opening at the moment. The rest of the bots all spun around to stare at her in shock. Katie was there. The mechanic stared wide-eyed and worried at Mangles, dark circles under her eyes. She looked pale and slightly hunched, as if she was about to fall over and couldn't hold herself up straight. She leaned on the armrest of her hostile chair, wearing an ugly police department t-shirt much too big for her thin frame, and pants that seemed borrowed from a nurse. Her hair was a tangled mess that hung over her exhausted face rather than pinned back like usual. There was a beat of silence before she and Toby bolted to Kiki, asking if she was all right, and frankly, fussing over her. Kitty! Toby tried to look at where she was stabbed, but she weakly caught his hand by the wrist and held it away. You're okay. You're alive, he said, pulling his hand back, pulling back his hand at her friend request to do so. She was already crying, and he joined her, breaking down into tears. We thought you were. He couldn't continue. Maggle scrambled to her feet with a screech of metal against the floor and shoved both of them aside to hug Phoebe, bent over the chair to reach her and shaking with suppressed sobs. I hope I have, Phoebe responded to Maggle's silent cry, the crack in her throat. All right. She opened she and Toby with a mildly reassuring smile and gently touched Toby's sagged ear, then the top of She's head. She took her hand and hugged it tightly, not able to speak just yet. Teddy leaned against the wall, looking utterly relieved that she was all right, and the quiet panic in his eyes finally settled. Surprisingly, the original seemed to share that relief. Chica looked like she wanted to hug the mechanic as well, but didn't want to intrude. She clamped her beak closed with her hand and let out a sound, resembling a happy sob. Freddie relaxed instantly, glad to see that she hadn't died. Bonnie stuck close to Foxy still, but he looked pleased to see her as well. His stiff ears rocking just a bit. Even Foxy was distracted from his task and sighed slightly, unintentionally leaning on Bonnie. Puppet stayed back and was as motionless as ever, but he looked like a weight had lifted from his shoulders. Petey grunted in pain and Mangle peeked back with a squeak, afraid she had hurt her friend. I'm fine, Phoebe insisted, with a croak in her throat, crossing her arm over her midsection to avoid someone accidentally touching her injury. Freddie turned on Jeremy, scowling. Why didn't you tell her she was okay? Jeremy put his hands up. She just woke up. And it's not like any of you actually answered the office phone. Foxy managed to got his grin in his distraction. Freddie sounded like a scowling mother, and with the man's response, the interaction was downright amusing. Petey tried to speak and started coughing, making them shut up. She spat up a gob of blood in her sleeve, so she quickly turned her arm to hide it away. Not that they didn't already see it. What are you doing? She demanded, a little out of breath and clearly in intense pain, as she eyed the offending piece of painted wood. That should have been able to stand up to Foxy's efforts, now that she thought about it. It's really Rocket? The toys all looked highly concerned over the blood with Mangle hovering over her. The Fox scurried worriedly and used the knuckles to wipe a little drop of blood from Hughie's mouth. The mechanic made a face and, without looking away from the original, sternly took Magel's hand and wiped the blood off the plastic with a clean particle shirt. The originals ignored the exchange as they were reminded of their earlier worries. Yeah, Bonnie was surprisingly able to speak up. She was pretty bad when she arrived, and we wanted to check on her, only it's locked. And Ruby carries the keys on her all the time. She never locks us out of places. Chica was rushing thing again, wringing her hands. She shuffled closer to Hedy, looking her over quietly, not quite trusting her own eyes. Hedy didn't seem to mind and just glanced at her as Jeremy stared silently. Can't even dent the stupid door, so it's gotta be the building stopping us, Foxy added, sending a scathing look at the door. The building shuddered slightly around them as if to confirm the suspicion. She disconnected the tablets, so we don't know what's going on, Freddie explained. And Goldie is in her posters, so we can't ask her to check. We've been trying to get in for 3 hours now. It's already almost 6, Chica whispered, looking extremely anxious. Right on cue, the chimes sounded, startling them. Jeremy swore under his breath in his fright. The week was over, the game was over, just like that. They waited for a tense minute in silence, expecting Ruby to appear, but the eerie silence persisted. Ruby won! She had to have won. So where was she? Foxy tried the door again, but it remained locked. But he muttered before pounding on it. He even kicked it before starting to back up again. Stop! Jeremy has my keys, he said, stifling another cough. She glanced at Jeremy, knowing she was in too much pain to lose herself for the time being. Chica sighed in relief. Right here, Jeremy said. He just took the right key and he tried it, but it wouldn't work. Oh, come on, Jeremy snapped. You sure it's this one? Yes, he said with a strange tone of voice as she stared at the unyielding door. Jerry tried for a little while, feeling as if staring at the back of his head getting more impatient. Jeremy, give me the key, Phoebe finally snapped. I know how to use these goddamn keys, Beauty, he said, and handed her building keys over anyway. I don't think it's you, Beauty mumbled with an odd knowing tone. The front door hadn't worked in either. It only locked when Phoebe tried. She doubted Jeremy thought much of it then, probably assuming he used the wrong key. Freddie shook his head. If the building doesn't let us in, it's still not going to. He was interrupted by the sound of a metallic click. Phoebe and everyone stared as she lightly shoved the door open with her finger. It didn't even creak. She blinked. They're my keys, she said with a shrug. Too weak to argue magic or some other ridiculousness. She glared at the door as if it was a child caught doing something it shouldn't. She gestured for Darren to push her through as Mabel let go of her free hand, since the door was only big enough for Phoebe's chair. Foxy stepped behind them, a frantic call of Ruby's name, and laughed. Only Steve moments before the door slammed in his nose of its own accord. Jeremy jumped and looked behind them as the boss knocked on the door, their panicked voices muffled. Steve tried opening it from their side as Jeremy tried prying it open with a disturbed look of confusion on his face. He might be okay with the box, but he still hated this weird building. Eventually, Freddie kindly told everyone to shut up. Ignoring Toby's mind complaint and Foxy's imploring growl, he told Hedy to find Ruby. It let you through at least, his muffled voice said, clearly upset. Be careful, he cried. I heard it's fine, she sighed. Okay, we'll get Ruby. We'll be back in a few minutes, Jeremy assured, as he pushed Hedy's chair. The lights behind them lit up as if the building was trying to lead them somewhere. Jerry groaned, but didn't question it. He was getting too used to this place. Bazar's fright was silent. No explosions or yelling. It actually seemed kind of peaceful and lacked the menacing air it had had all week. The long hallways didn't seem as dwarfing, nor did they stretch or turn into suffocating shadows at the end. The decor looked cheesy and fake, like it was always supposed to. You alright? Jeremy looked at Hedy. Ward she feels sick being in this part of the building. But she seemed fine beside the word frown on her lips. There was no twisting panic in her gut. It was like any other part of the building to her now. There was something else she couldn't quite explain, but when the words described the feeling came to mind, she would have stopped in confusion and Jeremy was pushing her. Safe. Apologetic. It didn't feel like her own fault. She looked up at the lights for a moment, a little scared of implication. Fine, Jeremy. Seriously, she whispered. Apparently I'm really hard to kill. Making light of her injury brings to work with her brother, despite the silly smile she shot him. Jeremy just shook his head, disturbed. He was still in his own kind of shock from the attack. He glanced around, half expecting the slingshot to pop out. He looked down when I came to a split in the hallway, both directions completely lit. That way, she mumbled. Jeremy replied without questioning how she knew. She knew the questions were coming, though she wondered from the other's perspective. She knew how Michael cheated. Did they chalk it up to all he was doing? Doubtful. She didn't want to keep what she learned a secret, but how was she going to explain it? She couldn't think of another explanation, despite the one she was stuck with being so incredibly strange. She couldn't worry about it now. Where was Ruby? How badly had she reacted? What state was Frank's newly vacant body in? Eventually, they turned a corner and found the answers she needed. The third thing she saw was the pipe, liquid oil, not blood, not her blood this time. The Antonite was on his back and completely still. His leg was limp inside the suit, turned at an unnatural angle. She saw the pool of oil before she forced herself to look away. She would see to the damage later, but her first intuition told her it was bad. Ruby was sitting against the wall. Oil splattered over her face and clothes. There was even some visible in her dark hair, glinting in odd holographic colors under the low lighting. She didn't notice them, which was odd. She was just staring at Spring with empty eyes, mind clearly somewhere else. Betty was beside her, also covered in oil. It was a good thing the building didn't let the box down here. It looked like a crime scene. Jeremy stopped, letting go of the chair in surprise. He moved to put a reassuring hand on Healy's head, his rough hand touching her hair gently. He swallowed. The last time she and Ruby spoke wasn't on good terms. She looked at Spring, a little thicker than his body was in that state of her, and guilty that she'd been looking forward to Michael feeling the pain that damage must have caused, but at what cost? Ruby was seen at the hospital, according to Jeremy. She had every reason to think he was dead. Jeremy said Healy's state was touch and go for a long time. Ruby? She whispered, barely hearing herself. It didn't sound like her own voice to her. Speaking seemed to take effort, like she was intruding on the silence. Never mind her soreness or the painful lump in her throat. The teen heard, though, head snapping up and around to look at her. She said for a long moment before hesitantly speaking. The hope in her eyes was painful. He? It was strange to hear the confident night guard sound so unsure, and it broke Healy's heart. Ruby stood up slowly and took a couple of steps closer. He still staring at Ruby's eyes, searching for some sign of how the younger girl was going to react. She felt a pang in her chest. Did Ruby still hate her? Healy. This time it wasn't a question. It was a statement. She stared at Healy for another long moment, which allowed the siblings to see that she was completely unhurt, apparently. There wasn't any red mixed in with the black oil, and she moved easily enough, if a little stiffly, like she'd been sitting in place for a while. Ruby suddenly launched herself at the older girl, slapping her in a hug and knocking her out of her chair in the process, making both Hedy and Jeremy yelp as the latter tried to catch them both to mitigate the possible damage. Jeremy went sympathetically, not fast enough to catch them. That had to hurt. Ruby, be careful, he stressed gently. He crouched down to see if Hedy was okay, worried about more stitches. Hedy ignored his hovering. Hey, Ruby, I'm okay. I'm right here. Fine. feeling of stickiness against her skin, under her shirt, where her chest hurt, unsure if it was oil or blood. Don't you ever do that again, the teen yelled, unaware they were on the floor apparently, and completely ignoring Jeremy. I thought, I thought you died. The last part was said in a trembling voice that they could hardly believe belonged to Ruby. They couldn't actually tell she was crying now. She tucked her head into his face into Phoebe's shoulder as the mechanic combed her back. That, of course, smeared oil all over her shirt. Her words were a bit worrying, too. She was one of the most optimistic people they knew, choosing to believe that she'd win life-threatening games and that murderous animatronics were great friends to have. And it also put a disturbing spin on Spring's injury. Was it some kind of twisted revenge? Could the killer through what he had endured? What she thought had killed the mechanic? Katie refused to cry out in pain at the justly full and just laid there. She held on to Ruby, whispering, I'm sorry, I know, I'm so sorry. The oil smeared across her cheeks and the shoulder of her shirt as it rubbed off Ruby's hair. Tears pricked her eyes, partly from the pain moving around so much cause, but she ignored it. Okay, thought I was dead too. She remembered her gaze drifting to the animatronic in the corner of her eye. She tore her gaze away and forced a chuckle, but her voice wavered as tears flung to her eyes. But I thought you had more faith in me than that, at least. I'll be okay, I promise. They did a good job patching me up. She tried not to think about the torture spring trap put her through, or how much damage her body had actually sustained. She'd never been in that much pain before, and it wasn't over. It hurt just to breathe, and she desperately just popped a few stitches. It was scary to remember he would have drawn it out longer if he could. Don't ever do that again, Ruby mumbled, still clutching tight to her. Who's going to keep me from going too far otherwise? It was the first time that Ruby acknowledged her as something other than a toy's keeper. She took a deep, shuddering breath. You give me too much credit. She gave Ruby a reassuring squeeze. You're not him. The teen's breathing hitched, but she didn't lift her head. Ruby had needed to hear that badly. The acceptance that she hadn't become as bad as the monster she opposed. Katie could feel her shirt becoming soaked with salty tears. They stung. Her arms numbed painfully as the wetness soaked through her skin. Oh, God. Oh. It freaked her out, but she didn't want Ruby or Jeremy to notice. Ruby didn't make a noise, but he could feel her shudders as she cried. Too proud to show her tears as always. I'm okay. You're okay. Everything's okay, she whispered soothingly, through her own tears. Jerry put his hand on her shoulder, and she reached up to hold his fingers like a child, silently thanking him for always being there for her. They stayed there until Ruby's shaking had eased a little. She stubbornly refused to lift her head yet. I'm sorry. She spoke so softly Phoebe could barely hear her. I thought I got all the loopholes to the deal. I still don't know how I got around it. There was a clear guilt in her voice. Phoebe tensed and hold on Ruby must have tightened for a second before Ruby stiffened. It wasn't your fault. You couldn't have known. Oh, Anne, how was she going to explain this? It wasn't your deal, Ruby. You worded it fine. She ducked her head lower, hiding part of her face in Ruby's hair as she looked over Night Guard's head at Spring with distant eyes. You didn't know, she whispered. She felt someone staring and glanced up at Jeremy. He didn't cry, but as their eyes met, he caught his arm and gave her a worried and confused look. She knew something, he was sure. He didn't trust how powerful the others said the building was. Never truly had. The way he spoke made it seem like Springtrap didn't break the deal, even though he obviously had. The tear in her stomach and lung was proof of that. He had thought about this before, but was patient and hadn't asked. The patient was running out. What do you mean? Ruby sounded confused. He got around the deal somehow. He stabbed you with that pipe. She turned back slightly to meet Edie's eyes. Up close, she could see the guilt and anger that she held. She blamed herself for the attack. What did I know? Her eyes narrowed. At least she was sounding a bit more normal. He stared at her with an unreasonable expression and really could see she was struggling for her explanation. Finally, he blinked and glanced away. I'll explain later. Hedy! Ruby's voice was a twisted mix of demand and pain. I will, he insisted. But right now, you just need to know it wasn't your fault. I need you to trust me on this, Ruby. Ruby glared at her. After a minute, she said, I'm not letting this go. I'm not asking you to. I just need to think about it first. What are you talking about? Ruby snapped. He hurt you. Looked away sharply as her voice cracked. And you know how? Ruby, he trailed off. The other types are worried about you, Jeremy interrupted Jeremy gently. We should head back. He glanced at Spring with fixed emotion. But come back to get Spring. He needs to look at him in the main room. You guys should calm the others down first, okay? She's gone. She suddenly sat up, straight up. The only sign of her crying, her red bruise. The only sign of her crying, her was her red furred eyes. Michael, I still haven't yet playing out with Spring. She stared defiantly at Jeremy. Seemed she was still worried of him on Spring trap. He was apparently completely forgiven. Jeremy jolted in shock at hearing the name. Michael? This whole time? He squashed the disgusted horror as hard as he could, locking it down in the deepest pit of his mind and filing it away for later. He shook his head. I believe you. I want to hurt him. He was the only one of them that could probably carry the suit, besides Columbia originally. But they might be traumatized by all the oil. It was the least he could do after everything that happened. I won't do anything to him. I promise. Ruby eyed him for a long moment, and he stared back guiltily. She'd always been a bit wary of him since he arrived, but his son did seem to have stripped away any goodwill between them. He'd have to start building up that particular relationship from scratch. Fine. She couldn't bring herself to look at the spot as she stood. Does the building keep them out? He nodded as she reached for her chair. Ruby's knowledge of things she should know, like Michael's name, didn't escape her. But why have you calmed me down first? She said, not noticing how strange wording was as she looked at the broken box. It probably didn't want them to completely see what Ruby didn't want them to see. It probably didn't want them to completely see what Ruby did either, for Ruby's mental state. But she wouldn't say that out loud. Ruby seemed to accept her strange way of talking about the building easily. Then again, she often talks about the place like it was alive too. Probably a good idea, she mumbled. Sure, the talk with Timmy had helped, but hearing it from someone else she was close to, that helped more. She was finally having to accept that it wasn't just the box she wanted to protect the her anymore. Let's go see them then. She glanced down at the oil that covered her in Vulpix. Maybe I should clean out first. She went. Oil didn't come out of clothes easily. She would know. She looked down at her own clothes, noting that she was going to have to wash them up too, but there was nothing she could do about it until she went home. She mumbled something sympathetic as she stared at his wheelchair hesitantly. She worriedly held out her hand to Jeremy. Ready? Jeremy said cautiously. He nodded stiffly and stifled a cry as Jeremy helped her up. Startlingly, Ruby stared wide-eyed. Jeremy barely reacted to her shout of pain. Too used to helping her like this, so he did frown. It always upset him how he even needed help for simple things like that. So she was unbothered by that reality. Her injury, of course, made it worse, but it was added pain. Are you okay? Ruby asked. He placed a fist over her stomach and squeezed her eyes shut as she got her breathing under control. Fingernails digging into her borrowed chair's armrest. She nodded her head. It just hurts. I'll be fine. Ruby nodded guiltily. She groaned as she remembered that there wasn't a bathroom in Bazar Fright, so they couldn't properly clean it up since the bots were all waiting outside the door. Huh, about the dramatize of all, she joked weakly. She wiped most deodorant on her face off on her jacket at least. He nodded. They'd probably be more worried about rubies than oils by the spring anyway. I felt frogs leave spring lying there, but they have to. And that's the end of chapter 77. A little long, but that's okay. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, leave a like, go leave a review. I don't want any comments on this video. I want you to go leave a review for the authors, praise them for who else. They deserve it. So go, but before you do go, be sure to subscribe. Upload new videos every Friday and Saturday. I'll see you guys tomorrow with the next chapter of Beauty of the Mind.